Hello, my name is Olivia. I want to tell you something that changed my life. It's the story of how I made my brain think in English. I used to struggle so much with speaking English. I knew some words, but my mind always translated everything from my language. It made me slow, it made me nervous. But now, I can think in English. I can speak easily with confidence. Let me tell you how I did it. I remember the first time I tried to speak English in front of someone. I was in a small shop near my school. The shop owner was friendly, and he asked me, "Can I help you?" I knew what those words meant. I had learned them many times in my English class, but still, my mouth didn't move. My mind was too busy trying to make a perfect sentence. I thought about grammar rules. I thought about vocabulary. I thought about how I would sound. I stood there for a few seconds, frozen. Then I smiled and just pointed to the thing I wanted. He gave it to me, and I left the shop feeling small and embarrassed. That moment stayed in my head for a long time. Every time I thought about speaking English, I remembered how I froze. I felt like I couldn't speak until I was perfect. I kept telling myself, I need to learn more words first. I need to understand all the grammar. I need to speak like a native speaker before I open my mouth. Because of that, I waited. I waited every day, hoping that someday I would magically become perfect. But of course, that day never came. I watched videos, I read grammar books, I made lists of words, but I didn't speak. I didn't even try to make small sentences. I thought learning more would give me confidence, but it didn't. The more I learned, the more afraid I became. I felt like I didn't know enough. There were always more words to learn, more rules to understand. It felt endless. And because I waited, I stayed quiet. My English stayed in my notebook, not in my mouth. My thoughts stayed in my first language, not in English. Then one day, something small changed everything. I was walking in the park. It was a sunny day. Birds were singing, kids were playing. I saw a little boy, maybe 3 years old, playing with a ball. His mother was sitting nearby, watching him. The boy kicked the ball too far and ran after it. As he picked it up, he looked at his mom and said, "I catched it." His mother smiled and said, "Good job, you caught it." I stopped walking. I just stood there and watched. That boy had made a mistake. He said, "catched" instead of "caught." But his mother didn't stop him. She didn't correct him in a harsh way. She didn't say, "You must speak perfectly." She just smiled and praised him. The boy was learning. He was speaking. He was growing. And no one expected him to be perfect. In that moment, I asked myself, why do I expect more from myself than from a child? That boy wasn't afraid. He just spoke. He used what he knew. And because of that, he was getting better every day. I, on the other hand, was silent. I was waiting to be perfect. But maybe perfection was never the goal. Maybe the goal was progress. Maybe the goal was practice. That night, I sat in my room and looked at my English notebook. I had written so many words but never said them out loud. I closed the notebook and looked in the mirror. I said softly, "Hello, my name is Olivia." It felt strange. It felt like the words were stuck in my throat. I tried again. "Hello, my name is Olivia." It came out a little smoother. I smiled. Then I said another sentence. "I like coffee." Then another. "I live in a small town." I kept going until I had nothing left to say. That small action changed everything for me. The next day, I didn't wait to be perfect. I made a decision. I would speak English every day, no matter how simple. I wouldn't worry about mistakes. I wouldn't wait until I had learned every grammar rule. I would use what I knew. I would grow from there. At the market, instead of staying silent, I said, "How much is this?" The shopkeeper answered, and I understood. I smiled. I had used English in real life. It felt amazing. That feeling gave me courage. I wanted to try again. The next day I said to a stranger, "Nice weather today." She smiled and said, "Yes, it's beautiful." Again, I felt proud. Not because I was perfect, but because I had tried. From that moment on, I stopped measuring my English by how perfect it was. I measured it by how much I used it. I made mistakes. Yes. I said wrong things. Yes. But I was learning. And learning is not quiet. Learning is noisy. It is full of wrong sentences, funny grammar, and strange pronunciations. But it is also full of courage, growth, and real progress. I started to notice something else too. When I stopped trying to be perfect, my fear also started to go away. Before, I was scared of being judged. But now, I was excited to try. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was just trying to improve myself. And that small change in thinking made a big difference in how I felt. Even my mind started to change. I stopped translating everything in my head. When I saw an apple, I didn't think Seb in my first language. I just thought apple. When I was tired, I didn't think that guy hoon. I thought I'm tired. These little moments told me my brain was starting to accept English not just as a subject, but as a way of thinking. But still, there was a big problem. I didn't have anyone to practice with. I had the courage now. I had the desire. I wanted to speak more. I wanted to get better. But there was no one around me who spoke English regularly. My friends spoke our native language. My parents didn't speak English. Even in school, we only used English in the classroom, not outside it. I felt stuck again. I had changed my mindset, but I needed a way to keep practicing. I needed a way to speak, even when I was alone. I didn't want to lose the progress I had made. I didn't want my confidence to disappear again. That's when I remembered something my teacher once said. If you can talk to someone else, great. If not, talk to yourself. At that time, I thought it sounded silly, but now it made sense. My goal wasn't to be perfect. It was to get used to English. It was to train my brain. And maybe I didn't need another person to do that. Maybe I could be my own practice partner, so I made a promise to myself every day I would speak to myself in English. I would talk about anything, my plans, my feelings, my day, the things I saw around me. It didn't matter what I said. It only mattered that I used English, because I knew that the more I used it, the more natural it would feel. I was ready to take the next step, and that's how I began my next journey, talking to myself every day. After I stopped waiting to be perfect, I felt something change inside me. It was like a door had opened. I was no longer standing outside the world of English. I had finally stepped inside. I was not just learning the language anymore. I was living it. But now I had a new problem. I wanted to speak more. I wanted to practice, but I had no one to talk to. My friends were still using our native language. My family didn't speak English, even in school. Most of the time we used English only in lessons, not in real conversation. At first I felt frustrated. How could I grow if I had no one to speak with? Would my progress stop again? I sat with this thought for a while, but then I remembered what my English teacher once said. If you don't have anyone to speak with, speak to yourself. Back then, I laughed when I heard it. It sounded so silly. Why would I talk to myself? Wouldn't that make me look crazy? But now, standing in this new space of confidence, that idea didn't seem so silly anymore. In fact, it seemed smart. I wanted to train my brain to think in English, and maybe the best way to do that wasn't waiting for someone else. It was starting with myself. The next morning, I woke up and said my first sentence out loud. Good morning, Olivia. It felt strange. I laughed at myself a little, but then I smiled. It felt good to use English in my real life, even if it was just me speaking to me. I continued. I looked around my room and began describing things. This is my bed. It is soft. I love sleeping here. Then I stood in front of the mirror and said, today is going to be a good day. I went into the kitchen and said, I am making tea. I like tea with milk. These were simple sentences. Very simple, but each one helped me feel more natural. Each one trained my mouth and my mind to connect English with real things. Soon I made this into a daily habit. Every day I talked to myself. In the morning, at lunch, before bed. Sometimes I stood in front of the mirror. Sometimes I walked around my room while talking. Other times I whispered softly on the bus or while walking home from school. The more I did it, the more comfortable it felt. I remember one day in particular, I was walking to the grocery store, and I decided to describe everything I saw. The sky is cloudy today. That tree is very tall. There's a red car. The boy is eating ice cream. I didn't care if anyone heard me. I was speaking quietly. It felt like I was giving a tour in English. I was practicing two skills at once, speaking and observing. One day, I made a mistake while speaking to myself. I said, he'd go to school every day. As soon as I said it, I paused. I smiled. I corrected myself. He goes to school every day. I realized something in that moment. I was becoming My own teacher. My ears were starting to hear the wrong parts. My brain was starting to notice when something didn't sound right. That was a big step forward. Over time, I didn't just describe things. I started asking myself questions. What do you want to do today, Olivia? I answered. I want to finish my homework, then I want to watch a movie. I would ask, how do you feel today? And I would reply, I feel happy. It's sunny, and I like sunny days. These small conversations helped me feel more comfortable with longer answers. It felt like I was slowly building a relationship with English. Then I started storytelling. I would take a memory, something small from my day, and tell it to myself in English. For example, if I saw a cat outside, I would come home and say, today I saw a cat sitting on a wall. It had white fur and green eyes. It looked sleepy. When I walked closer, it jumped down and ran away. I didn't use any fancy words, just simple ones, but the power was in the practice. I was thinking in English, building a scene in English, and feeling my confidence grow. Some days I talked to myself in a playful way. I pretended to be two people, one asking, one answering. What do you want to eat for dinner, Olivia? I want pizza. No, that's not healthy, but it's so tasty. Fine, let's eat a salad first, then pizza. I would laugh at myself sometimes. It was fun. And it helped me use real conversation patterns like the ones people use in daily life. I was practicing how to respond, not just how to speak. I was learning how to use tone, emotion, and rhythm. After a few weeks, something amazing started to happen. I noticed that I didn't need to force English anymore. Words started to come naturally. I didn't have to stop and translate from my native language first. If I saw a glass, my mind said glass, not the word in my native tongue. If I felt tired, my brain whispered, I'm so tired, not a translation. English had started to live inside my thoughts. This was a huge moment for me. I wasn't just learning English anymore. I was thinking in English. I remember another moment very clearly. I was walking home from school. I had a small argument with my friend earlier that day. While walking, I began talking to myself, quietly. I didn't like how she spoke to me. It made me feel sad. Maybe I should talk to her tomorrow. Maybe I should tell her how I feel. After a few minutes, I realized I had just shared my feelings, in English, without planning it. My heart spoke first. And it chose English. That evening I felt proud, very proud. I hadn't learned new grammar that day. I hadn't memorized new words. But I had used the English I already knew to express something real. That was the kind of fluency I always wanted, not perfect, just real. But let me be honest, it wasn't always easy. Some days I felt lazy. I didn't want to talk. I just wanted to lie in bed. On those days, I didn't pressure myself. I would just say one sentence like, I feel tired today, and give myself permission to rest. Other days, I ran out of things to say. That's when I began asking myself random questions to keep going. What's your favorite movie? If you could go anywhere, where would you go? These silly little questions helped me keep practicing. Sometimes, I made many mistakes while speaking. I used wrong tenses or mixed up words, but I reminded myself, this was not a test, it was just practice. It was just me, talking to me. There was no fear, no judgment, and because of that, my fear of making mistakes slowly disappeared. After 1 month of talking to myself every day, my speaking had changed. My confidence had changed. Even my voice had changed. I was no longer shy when speaking English. I didn't pause so much. I didn't whisper. I spoke with strength even if the grammar wasn't perfect. And the biggest change of all, my mind had started to live in English at least part of the time. Now I'll tell you a small secret. One day I was in a shop again, the same kind of place where I froze before. The shopkeeper asked me, do you need any help? This time I didn't freeze. I smiled and said, yes, I'm looking for a birthday card. He pointed to a shelf. I thanked him and walked over. That was it. Just a small conversation. But it felt like I had climbed a mountain. That one moment showed me how far I had come. And it all started because I stopped waiting to be perfect. And then I started talking to myself. Every single day, speaking to myself had given me a safe place to practice. It had helped me build confidence. It had trained my brain to think in English. But now I was ready to do more. I wanted to bring English even deeper into my daily life. I didn't just want to talk in moments. I wanted English to be part of my activities too. That's when I took the next step, using English during all my daily activities, making learning part of my life, not just my study time. After weeks of talking to myself, something inside me felt different. English didn't feel like a subject anymore. It felt like a friend I was getting to know better every day. I could speak simple sentences to myself, ask questions, answer back, even describe how I felt. I had created a little English world in my mind, and that world was growing. But as proud as I felt, I knew there was still something missing. Sometimes when I watched TV or tried to listen to native English speakers, I still felt lost. They spoke fast. They used words I hadn't heard before. Even when I understood the words, I couldn't always follow the tone, the style, the way they moved from one sentence to another without thinking. I realized that talking to myself was a good start, but I needed more. I wanted to speak not only with confidence, but also in a way that sounded real, like the way people talk in real life. I didn't want to sound like a textbook. I wanted to sound natural, relaxed, like someone who actually lived in an English-speaking world. That's when I started watching real conversations. And I don't just mean watching movies or shows, though those helped too. I mean watching real people speak English. I searched for interviews, YouTube videos, vlogs, and even reality shows where people talked in real situations. Not actors reading scripts, but normal people having normal conversations. At first I just listened. I let the words wash over me. I didn't understand everything, and that was okay. I just wanted to hear how people really spoke. I paid attention to their expressions, their pauses, the way they used short phrases instead of full sentences. I watched how they laughed, how they asked questions, how they showed surprise or sadness not just through words, but with their voices. Then I started doing something more powerful. I began copying them. Yes, copying. I would pause a video after a sentence and say the same sentence out loud. I tried to copy the tone, the speed, the feeling behind the words. If someone said, "Oh my gosh, are you serious?" I said it too. Not just once, maybe 5 times. I looked in the mirror while doing it. I watched how my face moved. I played with the sounds. It was fun, like playing a role in a movie, except the movie was my own learning journey. Sometimes I picked one short video and watched it again and again. I didn't care if I didn't understand every word. I just wanted to feel the rhythm. Native speakers don't speak like books. They don't always use perfect grammar. They don't always finish their sentences. They interrupt each other. They use small words like you, aha, like you know, totally, and no way. I began collecting those small phrases. I wrote them in a notebook. What do you mean? That's crazy. Seriously, no worries. I'm not sure, to be honest. At night, I would read the notebook and repeat the phrases out loud. Slowly, these phrases became a part of me. I didn't have to think about them. They just came naturally. One video changed me more than any other. It was a street interview with people in New York. The interviewer asked people simple questions like, "What's your favorite food?" or "What's something you wish you learned earlier in life?" The people's answers were short but full of emotion. One woman said, "I wish I learned how to say no earlier. It would have saved me so much time." I paused the video and repeated her sentence. Then I tried saying it with different emotions, happy, sad, angry. I didn't just learn the words, I learned how to make them real. I started playing a little game with myself. I would choose a person in a video and pretend I was that person. I copied not only their words but also their voice, speed, and even how they moved their hands. It felt like acting, but it helped me become more expressive in English. I wasn't just learning the language, I was feeling it. Soon, I noticed another change. When I talked to myself, my English started sounding more natural. I used more real expressions. I didn't always speak in full, proper sentences. Sometimes I used short, relaxed phrases like, "I don't know," or "Let me think," or "That's kind of weird." My tone changed too. I sounded less robotic, more alive. There was a moment that proved how much this helped me. I was at a birthday party. One of my classmates was talking about a movie she watched. She said, "It was okay, I guess, but the ending felt kind of rushed." I smiled and said, "Right, that's how I felt too. Like they just wanted to finish it quickly." She laughed and nodded. Exactly. That small moment was huge for me. I didn't just understand her, I connected with her. I sounded like someone who speaks English every day, and that happened because I had trained my ears and my mouth by copying real conversations another time. I watched a cooking show. The host said things like, "All right guys, we're gonna keep it super simple today, and let's throw that in the oven for like 20 minutes. I repeated those lines while cooking in my own kitchen. I smiled and laughed to myself as I said, "Let's throw that in the oven," pretending I was the host. Over time, I stopped translating in my head. When I wanted to say something, my brain pulled the right English phrase naturally, like, "Let's keep it simple" or "no big deal." These were things I never learned in school, but I learned them by watching and copying. It felt like I was learning the secret language of everyday English. Sometimes, I paused a video and wrote down an entire conversation between two people. Then I practiced both parts like a script. I read one part, then the other, changing my voice slightly. I pretended I was two friends chatting in a cafe. That helped me understand not only how people speak but how they respond, how they listen, how they react. That kind of practice made me ready for real conversations. I also discovered shadowing. That's when you play a video and speak along with the speaker at the same time. It's hard at first, but it trains your brain to catch words quickly and copy the rhythm of natural speech. I used to do shadowing for 10 minutes a day, sometimes with a TED Talk, sometimes with a podcast, sometimes with a scene from a sitcom. I'd sit in my room, headphones on, and just repeat every word I heard at the same time. It felt like dancing with words. One day, my aunt visited from another city. She spoke English well and asked me, "So Olivia, how's your English coming along?" I smiled and replied, "Better than ever. I've been watching tons of videos and copying how people speak." She looked surprised, "Copying like mimicking them?" "Exactly," I said. "It helps me sound more real." She nodded and said, "That's smart. That's how babies learn too. They listen, they copy, and then one day they just speak naturally." That made me think I wasn't just studying English anymore. I was learning like a child learns, by hearing, copying, trying, and feeling. It didn't matter if I didn't always understand every word in a conversation. What mattered was that I was slowly becoming a part of that world. The world where English isn't just words, it's a way of expressing thoughts, feelings, humor, and connection. And all of that started happening when I chose to do more than just watch. I chose to copy. And by copying real conversations, I built the bridge between my thoughts and the way native speakers express theirs. That bridge made my spoken English stronger, deeper, and more natural. But now, I wanted to take everything I had learned from talking to myself, from copying conversations, and do something even bigger. I wanted to start speaking with people, not just videos, not just mirrors, real people, real talks, real mistakes. Because the next step in my journey was the bravest one yet. Starting conversations with strangers. After all the time I spent talking to myself and copying real conversations, I felt a deep shift in me. English was no longer something I feared. It wasn't just something I practiced at night or whispered alone in front of the mirror. It had become a part of me, like a friend who was always around, waiting to speak with me, helping me see the world in new ways. But even with that growth, there was still a big wall in front of me. I could speak English if I had time to prepare. I could talk to myself or repeat what someone else said. But when it came to speaking to real people live in the moment, I often froze. My mind would suddenly go blank, even if I knew the words. I would start a sentence, stop halfway, then switch back to my native language just to feel safe again. That frustrated me. I had come so far, but I was still scared to let go fully. I realized something important. I was still giving my brain a choice to switch back to the language I was most comfortable with, a choice to stay silent if I didn't feel confident, a choice to say, maybe not today. And that's when I decided I would remove that choice completely. If I really wanted to speak English like it was my natural language, I had to live inside it. I had to give my brain no other option. I had to create an environment so full of English that it became my only path forward. So I made a new rule for myself. For the next 3 months, everything around me had to be in English. At first, I thought that would be difficult. I lived in a non-English speaking country. Most people around me spoke our native language. But I was determined. I didn't need to move to America to create an English world. I could build it, day by day, from where I was. I changed my phone settings to English, my laptop to. I deleted all music in my native language and filled my playlist with English songs, pop, country, jazz. I didn't care about the genre. I just wanted to hear the language all the time. I followed only English-speaking creators on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. If someone posted in my native language, I muted them for a while. It wasn't personal. I just needed to protect my English bubble. I stopped watching movies or shows with subtitles in my language. If I didn't understand something, I paused and rewound. I had a little notebook with me where I wrote down phrases that caught my attention. Then, I would use them later when I spoke to myself. But here's the part that really changed everything. I started doing daily tasks in English. When I made a grocery list, I wrote it in English. When I had to write a to-do list, I wrote it in English. When I looked in the mirror in the morning, I described how I felt in English. I look tired today, but it's going to be a good day. When I walked to the store, I looked at things and named them in English. That's a beautiful red flower. That dog is so playful. The man is carrying heavy bags. Even when I was thinking to myself, I switched to English. I stopped translating. If I didn't know how to say something, I found another way to express it. If I couldn't say I'm exhausted, I'd say I'm very, very tired. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. It wasn't easy in the beginning. I felt strange. Sometimes I would mix languages or get stuck, but I told myself no, going back. This is your world now. You live in English. I also told my family and close friends about my plan. I asked them to speak English with me at least once a day. Some of them laughed. Others were supportive. My little brother enjoyed it the most. He would come to me and say things like, "Hey Olivia, let's practice English now." It became a little game between us, but that game trained my brain. Even when I was tired, even when I wanted to relax, English was there. It became the background of my life. And slowly, something magical began to happen. My thoughts started coming in English first. I didn't have to translate. When I was hungry, I didn't think, "I want food in my native language." I thought it in English. When someone that made me happy or angry, I didn't feel the emotion in two languages. It came in English, and because of that, my reaction came faster too. One evening I went to a local cafe where a few foreign travelers were sitting. They were talking about places to visit. I walked by, smiled, and one of them asked, "Hey, do you know any nice spots around here?" Without stopping to think, I answered, "Yeah, actually. There's a lake just 10 minutes from here. It's quiet and really pretty." I heard myself speak and I felt surprised. It sounded natural, smooth. My tone didn't shake. I didn't pause. They smiled. One of them said, "Thanks. Your English is really good." I said, "Thank you," and walked away, heart racing with joy. That moment stayed with me. It reminded me that this approach, giving my brain no choice, was working. I joined online discussion groups where the only rule was to speak English. I didn't know anyone there, which made it easier to be brave. We talked about movies, books, daily life. At first I was quiet. I just listened. But week by week, I began to speak more. I made mistakes. Sure, but nobody laughed. Everyone was learning. I also started thinking about my goals in English. I had dreams of writing stories, maybe even teaching one day. So I kept a journal in English. Every night I wrote about my day, just what happened, but how I felt. One night I wrote, "Today I spoke with a woman at the bakery. I helped her find the right line. She smiled and said I was sweet. I told her thank you. I'm trying to be helpful, and it felt so easy." Wrote many little moments like that. At first, my journal entries were short, but as time went on, they grew longer. They were full of feelings, reflections, ideas. I stopped worrying about grammar or spelling. I just wrote to express myself, and that expression made me feel more free. You see, when I gave my brain no choice, I also removed the fear. I didn't allow the part of me that said, "You're not ready," to speak anymore. I simply replaced it with action. I flooded my world with English. I drowned my old doubts in songs, shows, talks, and texts, all in English. And the brain is smart. It adapts. It learns fast when it's surrounded by the same thing all the time. My brain didn't want to feel lost, so it caught up. It built new pathways. It made faster connections. Soon I began dreaming in English. Not every night, but often. I had dreams where I talked with people, gave advice, even told jokes. That was when I knew this wasn't just practice anymore. This was who I had become. English wasn't a goal I was chasing, it was now part of my identity. My old self, the Olivia who was too shy to speak, who waited for the perfect time, who worried about every little mistake, he was gone. I had stepped into something bigger. I had built a world around me that only spoke one language, and because of that my brain had no other option but to join in. It wasn't magic, it wasn't talent, it was pressure, but the right kind of pressure, the kind that makes diamonds. And now I was ready for the last and biggest challenge in my journey, a challenge that would test everything I had learned, because next I would do the one thing I had always feared. I would start using English in real conversations with strangers. In real life, no matter how nervous I felt. The day I started conversations with strangers in English was the day I stopped being the old Olivia. I could feel it. Something had shifted inside me forever. I was no longer the quiet girl waiting in the corner. I was no longer hiding behind prepared sentences or silent smiles. I was finally becoming the person I had imagined for so long, the version of me who spoke English with confidence, with ease, with joy. And it all started in my mind, because even after I had built an English world around me, even after I had practiced daily, copied real conversations, and forced my brain to live in English, I still noticed one small problem. When I thought about myself, I still saw the other Olivia, the one who used to say I'm not good enough, the one who used to freeze up, the one who thought I don't belong in English. That old image was still hiding in my head, and I realized I couldn't move forward if I still saw myself as that person. I had to change the way I saw myself. Not just the way I practiced, not just the way I talked, but the way I thought. So I asked myself a simple question. What would it feel like to be the English girl in my mind? What would she wear? How would she speak? What would she say when someone asked her a question in English? How would she order coffee, make new friends, answer the phone, or walk into a room full of English speakers? I closed my eyes and imagined her. She stood tall, she smiled icily. She didn't care if her grammar was perfect. She spoke with energy, like she wanted to connect with people. She listened carefully, nodded while others talked, and laughed out loud when something was funny, even if it was in fast English. She didn't apologize for her accent. She didn't ask, "Is my English okay?" She knew it was okay because she was always learning and improving. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be herself. That was the girl I wanted to be. And from that day forward, I decided to be her. Not tomorrow, not next week, but now, today, in every moment. So I started making small changes, mental ones first, each morning. I woke up and said out loud, "Good morning, English girl." It felt strange at first, a little silly even, but I kept doing it. When I brushed my teeth, I looked in the mirror and said, "You're doing great. You're learning more English every day." When I got dressed, I picked clothes that made me feel bold and bright, even if I was just staying home, because the English girl in my mind was confident. She showed up for herself. Before I walked into the kitchen, I said, "Today, I will speak English without fear." When I walked past people on the street and smiled, I imagined I could speak to any of them. I didn't even need to say a word. I just practiced the feeling of being open and ready, and something began to happen. The more I imagined myself as that English-speaking version of Olivia, the more I acted like her. My voice became clearer, my movements more relaxed. My thoughts started arriving in English automatically, not just when I practiced, but even when I had nothing to do. I would think, "What should I cook today?" Or "It's a beautiful afternoon," all in English. I didn't force it anymore. It was just there. I also changed the way I talked to myself when I made mistakes. Before, I used to say, "Why did I say that? I sound stupid," double quotes now. I said, "Oops, that was funny. I'll say it better next time." Before, I used to say, "They didn't understand me." Now I said, "I'll explain again." Communication is a skill, and I'm getting better. I stopped judging myself. I started encouraging myself, like a friend would. That shift just in my thoughts gave me new energy. I noticed I was starting conversations more easily at the grocery store. I asked questions in English even when the cashier didn't expect it. On the bus, if I saw a tourist struggling with directions, I helped them. I felt proud, not because my English was perfect, but because I was finally using it. Without fear. At home, I spoke more English with my younger brother. We made up stories, pretended we were in New York or London. I would say, "Hello, sir, may I take your order today?" And he would answer with a big smile, "Yes, I'd like a pizza with extra cheese." We would laugh so much. These silly little games helped me more than I thought. They made English feel like play, not pressure. Then one weekend, my friend Sarah invited me to a small language exchange group. I was nervous at first. These were all people who wanted to practice English or were native speakers. I told myself, "You are the English girl in your mind now. You belong here." We sat in a circle. Each person introduced themselves. When it was my turn, I said, "Hi, my name is Olivia. I've been learning English for a long time, but only recently started speaking it a lot. I love stories, music, and I want to feel like English is my second home." Everyone smiled. A guy named James said, "Wow, you speak very naturally. Have you lived in an English-speaking country?" I shook my head. "No, I just changed the way I think. I live in English now." In my mind, that moment was so important for me. I had said it out loud, and it was true. The group talked for over an hour. I didn't understand everything, but I understood enough. I answered questions, asked some too. I laughed, nodded, and felt like I belonged. Later that night, I walked home with my headphones on, listening to a podcast in English. The host was talking about mindset and said something I'll never forget. "You don't become what you want, you become what you believe." That line hit me hard, because for so long I wanted to speak English well, but deep down I didn't believe I could. I kept waiting for a day when I would feel ready, but that day never came. It only came when I stopped waiting and started believing now. Every time I faced a challenge in English, I said to myself, "I'm already her. I'm already the English girl in my mind." When I watched a movie and couldn't understand some words, I said, "She watches again and learns." When I forgot a word mid-sentence, I said, "She finds another word. She keeps going." When I got tired or frustrated, I said, "She rests, then rises again. She doesn't give up." It became my inner voice, my private coach, my best friend. Over time, I noticed something strange but wonderful. People around me began to see it too. Friends started saying, "Wow, your English is so natural now." Even strangers would say, "Are you from here? You sound very comfortable speaking English." But the biggest change was how I felt about myself. I no longer saw English as something outside of me. It wasn't a task or a school subject. It was part of who I was, like a new room in my house, like a new color in my soul. I started to love the language not just for what it could give me, like jobs or travel, but for how it had helped me grow. It had taught me how strong I was, how brave, how determined. It had shown me a new version of myself, and maybe that was the biggest lesson of all. Yes, grammar is important, vocabulary matters. But the real key to speaking English confidently, it's seeing yourself as the person who already can. It's acting like you belong. It's walking into every room with the belief that your voice matters. In any language. That's how I made my brain think in English. That's how I became the English girl in my mind.